Guys, welcome back to episode 7 of Parables in Pastiche. Joined here today with my two co hosts. We don't have a guest today. We've got Prophet and Devin. Unfortunately, Devin's webcam was giving us some trouble, so you can only see Prophet and I, but Devin is here. Today, we've got a very powerful episode for you. I hope that some of the people in the audience have heard of the Trivium process before. Essentially, the Trivium process is a three-step method by which you can pursue and acquire truth. It's pretty easy to understand, but if you learn to master it and implement it in your life, it's very powerful. So we've got another presentation for you like we did on the last episode, and we hope that we can help you understand this process. So we hope you guys are enjoying the show so far. We've truly enjoyed doing these episodes for you. This is episode 7, and we have a couple other shows and interesting things planned for this week as well. So we'll let you know more on that in the future. But I'll go ahead and let my co-hosts introduce themselves. So go ahead. Let's have Prophet go ahead first. Your mic's muted, by the way.
This is Prophet, one of the co-hosts here. Glad to be here, as always. Looking forward to the great conversation.
Yeah, hello, and it's Devin here once again. Very excited for the Trivium process. I think it's going to give everyone a lot of good, actionable information so that you can have better and more refined opinions, especially in an age of so much over information.
Yeah, that's definitely true. And that was one of the things that we mentioned. I believe it was episode 5. The over information. How did you say it?
Oh, yeah, it's over information breeds passivity.
Yeah, that's very true, and that's what this whole process, the trivia process, is about. It's very simple, but there is a science to it. So here, let me go ahead and share my screen so you can see the slideshow. There's that. So I'll have, we'll go ahead and Prophet, I'll have you turn off your camera and I'll get a presentation. There we go. So the trivium process, the absolute science of truth. There have been other people who have talked about this. It was Mark Passio, for people who know who Mark Passio is. Some people love him, some people hate him, but his information is very interesting. And I thought this was a great concept to try and teach other people. And as you'll see, part of this process is to ultimately teach the information to other people because to teach something is the best way of learning it for yourself. So, what is the Trivium method? It's very simple. Learning how to learn, learning how to think. And here's a nice graphic. That's it. It's 3 steps: grammar, logic, and rhetoric. It teaches you how to learn and teaches you how to think. That's all it is. There's nothing crazy to it. A lot of these principles I found that I myself had implemented in my own personal process, so it wasn't too foreign to me, and I feel like a lot of the people in the audience will feel the same way. So this 3-step process is almost thought of as a compression of information. It registers to me as this condensation, distillation, and compression of information, and that's really the core of the whole thing. So let's go to the next slide. The classical trivium process. Step 1, general grammar, the knowledge step. Step 2, formal logic, the understanding step. And 3, classical rhetoric, the wisdom step. That's all it is. So I'm interested to hear Prophet Devin. I'll let Devin go first. Are these things you guys have heard of before? Have you seen these? Have you implemented these in your own process before?
Yeah, I mean, I think that anybody who takes an epistemological outlook on life and anybody who has truly searched for truth outside of other people's influence has stumbled upon, some form of what the trivium is. Before I studied what the trivium is and understood it on a pretty deep basis, I would always call this my grand thesis on reality, where you have some building block foundations whether that's quantum mechanics, economics, politics. You have certain key understandings and skills within specific knowledge sets that you find out through on like a very logical basis, and you expand out those concepts so that you can better understand the world around you, so that you're not just taking other people's words for it. And I think that all knowledge and everything that you're reading, nobody's having any novel thoughts, of course, but it's more so deriving understanding from logic rather than the appeal to emotion, and rather than your own um, feelings of the situation. And that's the most important part about the trivium. It's truly establishing things in the guise of logic rather than ideology and feeling.
Yeah, just real quick, and I'll get your thoughts, Prophet. I just wanted to, and I should have put this in the presentation, but I wasn't thinking. This is the actual Merriam-Webster's definition of trivium. Essentially, the word trivium actually applies to the study of grammar, the study of logic, and the study of rhetoric. And while those are the foundations for the whole process, and that's not too far removed, the part that they're not necessarily insinuating is that it's a way by which you can put these things together to learn information. And the reason I wanted to pull this up was actually because of the root of the word. So it's from medieval Latin, and it means of the meeting of three ways or three crossroads. That's what the term trivium actually means. So, Prophet, let's go ahead and get your thoughts on it. Are these things you've heard of? Have you used them before?
Honestly, in the way that they were presented by Mark, no, I hadn't heard of them before, but I agree with Devin that if you take an epistemological approach, archetypally, you're going to find yourself using a process somewhat similar to this. One thing I'd like to point out, and I like that Mark did this, is grammar is about the knowledge, but it's also literally about the grammar. It's about having a large set of words you can use to describe what you're seeing, and enough instances of those words being used that you can attempt to derive a fundamental meaning or a commonality between them. If you don't have the words to describe it, then I don't think you can actually mentally play with it in a proper way. So a big aspect is the actual words.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I'm 100% there. What I wanted to do is I wanted to define epistemology. It's the study of how we come into a state of knowledge, how we learn things. That's what epistemology or epistemological means. So that's really what this whole process is about. It's about how you discover truth, and it's important to note that that's kind of the important facet of this, is that this is a way to pursue truth, and it's pretty bulletproof. If you can master these three steps, uh, you really will be in a great position to stay on the path to truth. So let's go to the next slide. And the next slide is just a restating of this, the mechanical trivium. When I was in psychology, one of the first things the teacher that I had said was that humans take in information through their five senses, and they do something with it in the mind, and then they act back out into their environment. And so your input is your grammar, processing is your logic, and then the output is your rhetoric. So it was interesting because that was something that I remembered, was that it really does boil down to that. And I imagine he was familiar with this process. I mean, he's one of the best teachers I had. So.
Oh yeah, and here, let me add something too. I think, can you go back to that last slide too while I explain this? So I think that a really good way to look at it, and this is a kind of fractal correlation, is the same way with math. You have your inputs, which are the numbers, i.e. the words, right, that you're going to be using for the logical sequences that you're going to be putting together to find truth. The processing is the equations that you're putting the numbers in, whether it's the algebraic or geometric equations to find out the given process. And then the output is the equations in the context of themselves to get the greater picture, right? Then for you to get physics. Exactly. And that's why it's not so much that, this just so happened to correlate. It's more so that like this is truly the fractal foundation of how logic is established for humans, right?
Absolutely.
And that's why these things occur rather than they happen, right? And it's the same way that math is found rather than discovered. And I think that's just one good point to make.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a good point. It's absolutely functional in nature, and by that I mean, in traditional algebra, you have some function. We'll call it f of x. So the function, maybe we square x. We say x squared is f of x. So your input would be the variable x. The processing would be the function itself, what we're doing to it. We're squaring it. The output would be what comes out. So if I put 2 in as x, square it is 4. And that's the same thing here. It's just a logical function. It runs the same each time, and that's what Devin meant by this fractal nature of the whole thing. So,
And that also implies that you can, when we're talking about it, there's not well, historically there's a religious significance to it, but if you're just taking it from a pragmatic, how does this help me perspective, there is no religious significance. There is no philosophy behind it. This is completely methodical. This is completely pragmatic.
yeah, and this can be done with any information. Really, as we'll see, this is interesting because we start to talk about, for instance, your grammar. The first idea from my notes that I'm reading here is that you want to gather knowledge from eclectic sources. So eclectic just means a variety of random sources from all, it doesn't matter, just everything. The more the merrier. And what you're doing is you're building a data set. Now that's a term that pops up in artificial intelligence. A data set is just a set of data that will be analyzed to draw some type of conclusions. So the grammar step, the available information step, is just about collecting. You don't have to think about it yet, not on the first step. You just collect and learn. And one thing that Mark Passio mentioned was that it's this idea of you encounter a word that you don't know. Do you look it up or don't you? That's fundamentally the first step. You need to master that. That's not hard. Okay, somebody says a word. I don't know what that word means. Do you just go on and say, oh, well? Or do you stop and look it up? That's a good habit to build. If you do that, you're acquiring grammar. So that's what it means by available information, the potential knowledge that may be gathered, processed, understood, and ultimately acted upon by individuals. Do you guys have anything to add on this slide?
No, I think we can go to the next one. This profit's good.
Okay.
Yeah, you covered it well.
This constitutes the grammar stage known as the input stage or the knowledge stage. Second stage is the decision-making process. These processes take place in the human mind and are chosen by each individual based upon available information. See, that's the interesting part of this whole thing. You don't actually need to use the same process that I use. In fact, you probably won't. No one does it the exact same way. This is just about how you process information. And a good general rule of thumb is that the more information you have, the bigger your data set, the better of a conclusion you're likely to make. It says it removes distortions from the information and processes and logically transforms the information into something that the individual is able to understand. A logical transform of grammar, which is, in our math example, if our function, we would take in x and we would square x, and then whatever that was, that would be our output. What you're doing is you're putting this information through a process to weed out logical inconsistencies or distortions. Really, you just want to, if I see one book that says something, okay, well that's one book. Maybe the guy's crazy, maybe the guy's stupid, who knows? But if I have 5 books that all have the same general thing being said, not exactly the same, but the same general thing. Maybe this book adds some information. Maybe this book talks about it a different way. But if I have 5 books, well, now I'm starting to have a foundation to stand on. Coincidentally enough, I'm glad that I said that, and I didn't mean to, but a foundation to stand on. So thus, we're standing under the foundation of what we have. And again, if I have 10 books that say the same thing, well, the 10 books that say the same thing, it's a more sturdy foundation than 5 books or than 2 books. So I hope you guys understand what I'm saying here. Why don't you guys go ahead and give me your thoughts?
Yeah, well, um, it really is about wrestling with this information. Now is the stage where you've gone past your immediate reaction and you can really look at what it's been saying and reflect on it and juxtapose it to other information in your data set and other things that you've seen. And that's where you can draw conclusions. And those conclusions are also information which you can reintegrate back into the system. And I think that's the beginning of the distillation process. That's what this is about. It's really distilling that down to what is real. What do you understand? You know? Do you understand it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think to continue that thought with the distillation process, and this is simply just the law of averages, right? It's when you have the jar, and I'm sure everyone ran into this if they've gone to elementary school in America, they would always have or a fair, they would have the game where it's guess how many jelly beans or guess how many marbles are in a jar. And it is a mathematical fact that the averages of all the guesses will always be closer, or not always, but will most likely be closer than anyone's individual guess, right? Because you always need as many points of data as possible from as many different perspectives as possible. And then to keep expanding that idea, it's the same thing with even refining your ideas, especially when you get to a higher level. If you are not conversing with people, if you are not taking in alternative data, then you are going to intellectually stagnate. So it is such an important part of this process to refine your understandings, and not only that, but take in alternative data sets, right? So that you might find a different way to get to that equal sign other than just the previous function that you were playing out before.
Yeah, a good way to think of that law of averages, the example that I always give people, is if I flip a coin 10 times, well, it's not going to be exactly 50-50. It's probably not going to be too close. But if I flip it 20 times, well, it'll be a little bit closer to 50-50.
Yeah.
If I flip it 100 times, well, the more I flip the coin, if I flip the coin an infinite amount of times, which is impossible, then it should be exactly 50-50. But as I get higher and higher and higher, it gets closer to 50 and 50, or the average. So that's the law of averages. So let's go to the next slide. Human behavior. This is the rhetoric step. Let me turn off my camera. Each individual's behavior is based upon the quality of their decision-making processes, which, in turn, are based upon the quality of their available information. This constitutes the wisdom stage, and wisdom is action, knowledge, and understanding all applied. So wisdom is essentially gained by the successful conclusion of this process. You gain wisdom when you have the knowledge, you understand that knowledge, and then you apply it either through teaching, rhetoric, or something else.
Well, and I don't know if you guys have experienced this, but I'll think I have a great understanding of something, and then I'll try telling it to someone else, and I'll realize just how inarticulate it is, and I'll realize about 2 or 3 places where, okay, I didn't think about that, and I don't actually have the right image in my head, you know? So expounding it really is a very, very important step. You cannot skip the teaching step. You have to put it into action, whether it be in your day to day life, in your actions, in your words, teaching someone, whatever it is, it needs to be put into action.
Yeah, and you can do this many different ways. I mean, it doesn't have to be the same for anyone. In fact, I would heavily stress that this process should be uh, different for everyone. Everyone should be doing this slightly differently. If your process is the same as my process, and we're two different people, then one of us is gaining more from that process than the other. So it's important that this is personal. These are very objective steps. These are objective. You don't have to do them the same way. They apply differently to everyone. see, manifested reality. So this is not one of the steps, but this is the ultimate. I guess you could say the capstone of the process. Like this is the complete thing. Um, Once you do all three steps, it manifests the reality for which you live in. So the quality of the condition which manifests in any society is based upon the aggregate quality of human behavior within that society. This is the generated result of the Trivium process, and it comes to order or chaos, which is very interesting. It's a very interesting conclusion that we have in our manifested reality. Do you either have a ordered society or do you have a chaotic society? And I would probably say in recent times it's become much more chaotic, um, which is right along with this concept that people don't know this process, people not putting it into effect or into everyday life and use as well as they could. And it's because they don't teach this process. This is not a process that's taught in public schools. This is not a process that's taught even in some universities. I mean, I had heard apparently there was some professor who was teaching this process and got fired for it. They got fired for teaching critical thinking skills, which is outrageous. I it's not surprising though. The government will always get what it pays for.
Well, and not to go off on a tangent too, but we might as well cover this for just a second. I mean, this is a very large part of what narrative control is, right? And we don't even have to assign we don't even have to assign connotation to this per se, but if you can basically establish a societal standard that is against these types of processes of thinking and tackling logic and reality, then you can set up and establish narratives that much easier, right? And this is a big portion of the reason why we're even starting this channel. It is to try and get people to see the illusions that are being set up in society to control us.
Yeah, very true. Prophet, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, well, if we take Devin's point that this is archetypal and a baseline foundation, this process, and it can be incarnated many different ways, then the modern data processing that everyone is operating on today is something akin to input information, authority bias, community bias. That's not the term for it, but I forgot the term. Run through the biases. How will this affect me socially? How do I feel about this? What if I internalize this? How would people look at me? These are the subconscious processes. And then they categorize the information and they're done with it. And they don't pick up the information or think about it or put it adjacent to anything until they're telling it to people. So you could almost call it pastiche of the trivium process, of the process of finding knowledge, is what everyone's doing today.
That's a
And
very
that
good.
allows for narrative control, just like Devin was talking about.
Yeah, that's actually a very fascinating point. I'm glad that you drew that conclusion because it's very true, and it really is surprising to me. It blows me away that we chose the name for this show, Parables and Pastiche. And for the most part, almost every single episode, it's kind of just shown itself. That is what we keep coming back to, is this idea of pastiche,
Yeah, we are not
mockery.
looking for topics that are pastiche.
No,
They
it's
just come up.
yeah, they really do, and it happens pretty naturally, which is the fascinating part. I mean, it's not like we had the goal to connect this information to it. It just kind of pops up in the mind as you go through it. Again, I put this presentation together and took some notes, but for the most part, as we're presenting it to you, we're kind of reading it and we're just giving our thoughts on it while explaining it to you. So we're learning from the process as well. It's part of the rhetoric stage, is what we're doing. Now that we have this information, we're going to try to condense it down into a slideshow and share it with you. So this is just a summary of the process. The process by which reality is constructed, the Trivium process. So first is knowledge or grammar, understanding, decision-making processes, your logical transform of the data. The third is the wisdom, human behavior based on the quality of the information and quality of decision-making processes. And the fourth is the generated result. Again, that is the outcome of the whole three steps. The quality of the condition manifested based on quality human behavior in a society. So when you get people together, again, here's that fractal nature. Once you get all these people together, hopefully with the Trivium process, well, they are going to all work together and they're going to generate a result. And that's going to be the quality of your society, the quality of human behavior in your society. And
Mm-hmm.
then this right here is I've shared this. I've shared this a few places already. But this is a really interesting graphic that shows you this process a little bit more. And I think it's interesting the concept of sowing and reaping, because we reap what we sow, and so that really is the basis of this whole process. So the sowing, the creation of effects, is going to be your grammar, and your logical processing is going to be the reap, and then back to sowing with your rhetoric. You're going to sow it in other people. And so this is a very interesting way to look at it, and it gives you some adjectives and some descriptions for what or how this functions. Uh,
Yeah, absolutely. And I think to keep carrying that thought forward, you can't you can argue you can't do anything with your grammar and logic. You can be the most you can have the most the most intellectual brain on the planet, right? And know every single word possible, okay? But if you don't have any wisdom, you're going to be a slave to your vices, and you're going to be a slave to other people's opinions, and you're going to be a slave to the greater societal influence and system. So wisdom is really the end point of all of this. It is the goal in the Trivium process to acquire wisdom so that you can actually act on all these things that you have learned.
yeah, one of the most important things to understand is that wisdom implies action. You mean you're not necessarily able to be wise if you're not putting it into action. It requires that action step. You have to actuate these things. You have to output something. How you output it, how you teach it. The who, what, where, when is your grammar. The why, your logical processing, and then the how is the wisdom and output. It's a very interesting graphic, and I'll be posting this to all of our
Yeah.
pages just so you guys can review it. There's another graphic too, and it's a little bit more advanced, but we can just kind of discuss it when we get there.
Yeah. I love this graphic. For one. Um, I kind of lost my train of thought there. That sucks.
It's okay. Let's see. I think it's the next page. The grammar. Grammar is who, what, where, and when. And this is just a recap of the process. The collection of information, essentially just get as much information from as many different places as possible. You want to build a relevant data set of universal grammar. You want to have words. You want to understand what these words means, because words construct reality. And if you don't understand that, I highly suggest you look into that a bit more. Perhaps that will be a future show, but words construct reality, and that's very, very embedded in society. It gets into a whole other topic of reality construction using words and magic and chaos magic and whatnot. It's very interesting. But long story short, the more variety you have in your grammar set, the better your reasoning and rhetoric will be. That's what you have to remember here.
I think a good point on this is we don't actually know out of the ancient philosophers or philosophers throughout history who was really the smartest and who really was the most wise, but one that sticks with everyone across political boards and thinking boards is Nietzsche. And I'd say the reason for that is because he had such a large set of grammar and such a you I wouldn't go so far to call it novel, but he had such a good way of using those words. The way that he constructed his ideas with words allowed his message to be translated 200 years into the future where people still consider him a prophet. So if you don't have those words, you will never be able to articulate what's within You know, you need to have that grammar, that context. You need to. It's extremely important.
Yeah, I mean, again, we've got a lot of topics we want to talk about, and we're going to get there because that's worth doing a show on. And I actually have a friend on Twitter X who put together a little bit of a slideshow, and I'll have to ask him if he minds if we use a couple slides out of it and talk about that with you. Maybe, I mean, if he's willing to be a guest, I don't know. But he does some writing and whatnot. His work really is on the power of words, and one could even call them spells. You know, spelling a word uh, is very fascinating. But as a matter of fact, if I articulate something using a grammar set that is very advanced, that I guess uses words that have very specific meaning. So if I use this word, like you know what that is, I'm trying to think of a good uh, example. Do you guys have any big words that you like that would be a good example? It's just not coming to me right now.
Hmm. Uh, Not a big word, but diving so deep in the parasite thing, one word for me has been exum. Exum.
What does it mean?
That is it is produced by the parasites, and it is something that takes over your cells and has the ability to manipulate cell signals and send cell signals, as well as manipulate them to an extent where it can change what type of cell your body thinks it is and access different parts of your body. So if I didn't have that grammar to describe that specific context to that specific fractal level.
One interesting thing is, you know, for instance, if I was, I guess maybe a microbiologist or someone in that field, that word would effectively serve as a way for me to say everything you just said. When I said, "What does that mean?" You would
Mm-hmm.
you're essentially compressing a very specific idea down into a specific word, and the more you have of those, the more complex ideas you're going to have access to. And so what happens is if you have a conversation with a person, and especially in the United States, if you go around the United States, you're going to find so many people who unfortunately have gotten to this point where okay, you are communicating with somebody and then your response is just yeah or okay or oh okay, and it's like you're not articulating anything back. And so really when people are not communicating using any type of specific words, it's just yes no, it's just a binary signal. But when you use deeper words, you can communicate more, and people are going to have more access to the message and to your emotions giving that message. Especially if you learn how to pair those words with tone, the influx of tone in your voice. That's very important. For instance, here's an interesting concept. If you have like a dog, an animal, or something, you know, do a test. You say "I love you" to your animal, to your dog. Say it with a kind tone, like you normally would, and then try it by saying "I love you," but say it in an angry tone. Sound angry, but say the same thing. It's that tone and the voice, which is what the animal recognizes. That tone is very important. So if you learn how to use tone and stress certain things, you can convey more information that way. For instance, if I stress a certain word, you know that I want you to pay attention to that word. So language is extremely powerful. As a matter of fact, I think language is consciousness. I think it is 100% language based that we are able to think on higher levels. Devin, let's
Oh,
hear from you.
no, yeah, I absolutely agree. And to keep carrying that forward, what you were talking about, language is the human consciousness put on to a page. And what I mean when I say that is that without our ability to converse with each other, we wouldn't have even had the preconditions to be able to like all these ideas that we have bubbling around in our heads are things that we've gotten from other people, right? Our collective society and our collective knowledge as a species, as a human race, essentially is this language process extrapolated through thousands of years of space-time. And when you really start to break that down, that language is consciousness, then you could start really seeing what we're talking about with this process and how important having a very flushed out understanding of the English language and grammar is. It's because it literally creates the preconditions for you to connect with other people. And without us being able to connect with other humans, we wouldn't have society. That's all
Hmm.
society is the connection between each person to each other, and then how we blend together to then create what we have now.
A
And especially
tapestry. They call it the tapestry of time.
precisely, and it really is that, and that literally is what society is. It, especially with how it, because in the past you could argue a little differently, because we weren't as societies were a lot more self-sufficient. But now, with how integrated the global economy is, with how reliant we are on different trade partners, right, or even the man down the street to fix our toilet, it becomes that much more important to have refined language systems. And like Urban was saying, if you have a degeneration in the language process in a society, I mean, that can be akin to a economic or political or war crisis, because of the potential breakdown that can happen in the social fabric in the individuals.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
absolutely.
I
100%.
mean, I love what Wittgenstein says. He says the limits of your language are the limits of your world, or I think he says the world.
I'm gonna have
But
to write that down. See, I like anytime I get a inkling to write something down, I usually do. So say that again for me.
yeah, the limits of your language are the limits of the world.
The limits of your language are the limits of the world. Interesting.
Yeah, and I don't think I can really add anything more onto the society piece. You hit that on the head, Devin. But I want to nail home for the audience that words are one of, if not the most fundamental thing for higher level consciousness. And I love these quotes, so I just have to say them. You cannot speak yourself out of your tongue. You cannot talk yourself out of your tongue. Like it is so fundamental that it is, I mean, you can't talk yourself out of your tongue. You can talk yourself out of almost anything. You can convince yourself of almost anything, but the words are always there as a presupposition to all of that.
I
And if
wrote
not the
both of those
words,
down.
then what the words really are, which is a union between your network of memories and emotions and a structure which is agreed upon between all people. Tone are words, facial expressions are words. They call it body language for a reason. All of these are incarnations of language,
Yeah, and
and the spoken language is one of the highest.
that's one of the things about animals. For instance, your dog and your cat has body language, and obviously their eyes. They look at you with their eyes, and it's almost like you can see something. Some emotion in them. But one thing that I've always been fascinated with, I will watch like these reels on Facebook or something, and people are posting their birds. So like they have parrots and stuff like that, and it's fascinating to me that the birds are capable of basic language, and some birds are very smart. And I've seen a couple that for instance, the guy will show the bird an item, and the bird will have to tell you what the item is, and the bird gets a little treat. So the birds learn how to do this very well, and it fascinates me because, again, to our point about language being consciousness, if your dog or your cat or whatever pet just walked up to you and started speaking plain English one day, just like you and I are talking right now, it's like you could understand everything he was saying. Well, at that moment in time, the dog kind of becomes human in a way. It's because if the dog is going to speak English to you, what's the difference between the dog talking to you about its feelings and another human talking to you about its feelings? And so language grants this elevation in the mind. And so I wonder about birds. If birds are capable of communicating with their owners, and birds live for like 80 years, which is also fascinating. So, do birds have this weird gray space where it's like you almost feel like your bird that you've had for 30 years is a fellow person there? Like, I don't know. I don't have a bird, but I'd be curious to talk to somebody who could answer that question.
Yeah, totally. I
But
mean, I'd say the thing that differentiates us is, you're right, it's the resolution of our communication.
yes,
And
absolutely.
and I don't even mean communication strictly between us, because you can talk with yourself. What is overcoming an emotion or an addiction but talking to yourself and realizing, getting a high resolution image, putting the fog away of where exactly you're at, what you're doing to yourself. You know what I mean?
Yeah, one would say meditation or prayer is just a form of that. And that's, I mean, that's, I would say that. Um, that's valid. One thing I wanted to bring up is that, and again, I'm very bad with the actual citations. I don't have the citation memorized, but the Bible says that the power of life and death resides in the tongue, and that's very true. And secondly, again, I don't remember exactly where, but this flaming sword, which is logos. I think it's in Revelation somewhere. This flaming sword comes out, and it's this idea that the ultimate weapon is logic. You can defeat anything with logic, and it's that no, 2 plus 2 doesn't equal 5. 2 plus 2 will always equal 4, and that's it. Numbers are objective, and that's why fundamentally the whole universe is mathematical and numerical. Um, yeah.
Great transition into the next step of the process.
So the how, the rhetoric and teaching, the final stage, the goal is to condense or compress the information down into something that's easier to understand and teach it to others. This is data compression, like I was talking to Prophet about. That when he was, what was that word that you told me? Uh,
Oh, I can't remember now.
Exa or something.
Oh, Exum.
Exum. Okay, so what that is that word, which most people will not know what that word means. I didn't know what it means, but and to be honest, I'd probably have to hear him talk about it again, maybe one or two more times. But the idea is that there's this very specific need to communicate something in that field of microbiology, and now we can compress that whole idea down into a word, exum. And so that's what this whole thing is, but it's with the logic and what you've learned. So if I've taken all these notes and I've watched all these different people talk about the Trivium process, well, based on the notes, and I've got them right here in front of me, and I'm kind of reading my little bullet points off whenever it works. Um, it's that we're condensing this down. I mean, we're going to put this into a 1 hour video and the slideshow, which I'm going to, publish the slideshow and let everyone have all these slides. It's that we're trying to take this process, which some people will spend years studying the 3 steps. And as a matter of fact, let me just go ahead and plug my guy. Uh, Joe Williamson from Facebook. He said that he actually wrote a little bit about this, the 7 liberal arts. So I'm going to actually post the link to his article um, in the sources section. Once we get done here, I'm going to update all that, and I'm going to post his article and check it out, and you guys should too. So it's this idea that a lot of people have spent years of their lives studying these things. That's what for instance, a professor or something is. This guy has spent 10, 12 years studying in his respective field. So when you go to a lecture and you hear him talk, he is just doing the rhetoric stage. And that's why, the ultimate, uh, I, I guess the ultimate aspiration of some fields, once you have been in that field for 10 years, well, now it's time to go and be a professor, because to ultimately master that field is the rhetoric and teaching stage. And so that's why so many very smart people are professors or teachers. It's because they're practicing the final stage of the trivium. And this process is a fractal. Again, it's like you never complete it, but you complete it on such small scales, and then those are bigger scales, and it really is a fractal. So it's
Hmm.
like, sure, we're practicing the rhetoric stage for the trivium right now, but ultimately this whole podcast, every episode that we will ever do, is our version of practicing the rhetoric stage. That's what this podcast is. And so this is a tool for us to practice the Trivium process.
Absolutely. Devin, I'd like to hear from you. I just have one thing to add that came to mind that I have to say. It's interesting that in German mythology, the highest god is Wotan, and he is described as the creator of the symbols. He created language. And if you put that in the context of what you just said, Urban, it seems like the highest god is him who can compress it the most and come up with the best words. He created the words to describe our reality, and that's what makes him the highest god. I think
Yeah,
there's a story behind that, but it's really interesting
Well, real,
association.
real quick before Devin talks, I mean, I believe it's the book of John in the Bible. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And the Word in Greek was logos, which I really personally think that once you study the words of the Bible in their original languages, you're going to learn a lot. Because I think word is not an accurate, the English word. I think you need to know that it's logos, because logos means generally logic. So yeah, to your point, absolutely. And then you have the scribes, Enoch, and you have Thoth in the Egyptian legend. And I wonder if Wotan would be the same as Thoth, the scribe of God. Metatron, Enoch,
Hmm.
they're all considered to be at God's side as his scribe. So the ones writing down or perhaps weaving the tapestry through time. But Devin, go ahead.
Sure, yeah. I think this kind of just drills back to the same point that I kind of talked about at the beginning. It's that this is basically uh, the, the the same way that language is the foundation for all of civilization, because it creates the capacity for us to communicate with each other so that we can create more integrated systems. This goes along with our striving for efficiency in society. The very basic function of all of this, what we're talking about at the end of the day, and if we take it from an evolutionary perspective, at least too, it's to better organize each other in a more efficient way so that we can survive, right? And that's essentially what society is. That's what language is. It's a survival function, and we are just simply at the very precipice of that right now. And this expression, and this is also where it gets a little screwy, because if you can argue that there's lots of literacy rates collapsing in the West, people don't read anymore, people aren't having that deep of conversations, then you can ask yourself, is our society, we might have a better large language model, we might be developing AI, we might have all these cool flashy things on the horizon, but if we're truly not refining language, and if we're not trying to aggregate as much society as possible into having better ideas, then I don't think the technology is going to do us too good, if we can't actually
Very true.
connect better and push that side of our evolution forward.
See, here's the thing. If you go back, and this is very interesting, and I encourage anybody to just try it. Doesn't matter what. I mean, hell, the Gettysburg Address. Go listen to or read the Gettysburg Address, the original address. Go back to any speech from any president over 200 years ago, maybe 150 years ago. But you will notice that their language, and I am not saying that even I can comprehend it all the way. I'm not that talented. But their language that they were using to write and to speak 100 years ago. Look at Edgar Allan Poe. Look at some of the presidents from that time period. Their speeches were so rich with language, and I find myself having to listen or read some of them multiple times just and look up words, because some of the words I don't know. And so you can really see that it's like they would speak at a collegiate level, and now people don't even know what I am saying when I say collegiate level. That means at a college level. Case in point. But
Well, you don't even have to go as far back as Edgar Allan Poe. You can even go back and listen to the radio stations,
from the
right? Just
60s.
from this exactly. But people talked with they had so much deeper vernaculars and understandings of and this really is the fact. It's a simple fact, and of course multiple things going into this, but it's the fact that the internet has created this ability that we don't have to remember things anymore. We don't have to read anymore. Tabloid news and audio books and podcast and videos and video formats being in every possible thing imagined. It's created the preconditions for our brains to turn into this mush, to where we aren't refining language anymore, to where people aren't reading, to where the average American is barely even on an 8th grade reading level, right? I mean, I would bet the average American, I don't know the statistics off my head, but I would say at least 80% of Americans probably haven't read at least 4 books in the past year. I mean, people just don't read anymore. It's become a thing in society that has been completely put on the back burner because of how digestible content is in so many other forms.
Yep.
Absolutely.
And I mean this with no political meaning, but just look at Trump's speeches. I walked in, I said, wow, look at that guy. I looked at him, I said, wow, he repeats everything twice, and he speaks very simply. I wouldn't even say succinctly. He just speaks simply.
Yeah, you could even hear him, like, if I read something he said, like, for instance, in a blind test, if I came across something written down and I didn't know that it was Trump and I read it, I could probably tell it was Trump just by reading it once or twice. It's nothing, like he said, nothing political. I'm not saying bad, good, anything, but he definitely has he has a brand almost to the way he communicates. And, I will say this: love him or hate him as a politician, I believe he is a very, very skilled, I guess you could say stage magician. One would even say magician, because he can captivate and work an audience so well. It's like, even if you hate him, you're still talking about him. And that is what is interesting, and I think what will be most memorable in the long run, 50 years down the line, when, like, he's in the history books. I think the one thing that will stand out is how much camaraderie there was around him. Let me go ahead and just get through this slide real quick, because I think the next one's a graphic. The protege effect. I wanted to nail this down, that teaching someone else is the best way to learn. So this was a little quote from Psychology Today. For thousands of years, people have known that the best way to understand a concept is to explain it to someone else. While we teach, we learn, says the Roman philosopher Seneca. I think Seneca. Now scientists are bringing this ancient wisdom up to date, documenting exactly why teaching is such a fruitful way to learn, and designing innovative ways for young people to engage in instruction. So it says students enlisted to tutor others, these researchers have found, work harder to understand the material, recall it more accurately, and apply it more effectively, in what scientists have dubbed the protege effect. Student teachers score higher on tests than pupils who are learning only for their own sake. Yes, absolutely. This is absolutely true, and I can say that from personal experience. When I was I did very well in mathematics. And I was always the one that, oh, this person needs help. Okay, so I would sit down and I would try to explain it to him. And yeah, 100%. That is what helps you logically process. It's like, okay, if you have this information in your head, it's not wisdom unless you apply it. And so when I'm putting the information, like, okay, I know this, but I need to explain it to someone else. So let me try to explain it a different way than I understand it, that they might understand it. That's me processing, chewing through. It's like you're chewing the food in your mouth. You're chewing through the information and you're restructuring it and you're learning it better. So yeah, 100%. Anything to add on this slide, guys?
Well, I think, just one small thing. This stage also allows you to have a mirror of reflection, because at the end of the day, all of your work has been done from your angle. So
Absolutely.
to translate that to another angle, when you put it in those words, makes total sense why it would be integral to the process of attaining truth.
No, that's great. I think that's a excellent. Okay, well, case in point, that's exactly what you just said, is the fact, I sat here and I read this to you and I gave you my thoughts on it, but then I said, do you guys have anything to add? And Prophet adds that. So it really is the fact that there's three of us here bouncing this. If it was just me running this show, which, whatever, it would probably still be fine, but it's like I would be losing out on so much because I don't have, and even if it was just two people, if I only had one of either Prophet or Devin here, the fact that we have three, and again, the Trinity, the Trivium, proton, electron, neutron, three is a solid number, so that's why we thought three people would be a good panel for this show. But bouncing this information around three ways, really, you're just, for instance, I wouldn't have even thought of it like he said that, and now that he said that, uh, there is a point to that. That's absolutely true, and that's the benefit to having people to make good conversation with. But
Yeah, and then just to add one more thing to this as well, and not to get too schizophrenic and insane, because I think that if you actually are able to fully sink your teeth into this concept, you'd go like actually mentally insane. It's this idea that like for all action to be able to happen, like even atoms functioning together, you need these 3 points of expression of reality, right? It's the same thing, like that, how reality plays out, right? It's basic atomic structure, it's how ecosystems work, and like all these things really do correlate and come together to like how reality manifests itself and is created. You could even, of course, there's more things in solid, liquid, and gases, but you really do see these themes and threes in systems
It's
that are
fucking
very
everywhere.
complex. Yeah.
Even in Hindu, their highest, they think after the nothing, you have three elements of reality: creation, maintenance, and destruction. And that trinity is the fundamental baseline for the whole Hindu cosmology. And then we have our German friend, C, P, and M, or C squared, P, and M. You know what I mean? The triad is extremely deep, and it is expressed in many ways. Electron, neutron, just like you
yeah,
guys were saying.
maybe we'll do a show on that, because there's so many topics that are just interesting to teach to people, but that really are worth discussion. This graph here, this is made by the same person that made the other one. This has the same steps. You have your grammar, logic, and rhetoric step, but you also have another three pair, which is interesting. So the seed of life, which is a very important geometric, sacred geometry shape, and then you have that threshold of caring to learn and caring to teach, which is very true, um, very deep, as a matter of fact. Let's see, nature and nurture. Those are important psychological concepts, and with care in the center. So it's all about care. All of these things come together and manifest care, consciousness, intelligence, care and desire, courage and will.
Well, I mean, you gotta ask yourself, do you care? Do you care to learn? Do you care to learn what's really happening if it means destroying your illusion of what you've convinced yourself and what you've allowed yourself to be convinced of is happening? Do
Very
you
true.
care to teach it to other people? Do you care to continue the distillation process, or is 80% good enough for you? And is knowing that you have more information than everyone and feeling good about that enough for you?
Very true. Devin, do you have anything to add on this?
Oh, I mean, yeah, that's just the basic of all. That's the basic of all human action. The basic necessity of all human action, right? Outside of your real necessities, right? Like needing to
Mm-hmm.
drink and eat. It's your will, right? I mean, that's literally what that is. But that's all I can really. That's all I really add on to it. You
These
pretty
are
encompass it.
these are pretty powerful graphics. I'm gonna post all of these everywhere and put all the sources and stuff together, so you guys hopefully will review this or reference it. I mean, these are great references. I mean, this is something that if you truly understand the significance of this information that we've presented to you today, and of course we didn't, obviously there's more to it because we only had about an hour and we only had about 16 slides. So obviously this is much deeper than we could ever put into 1 hour, but we really hope that this at least puts you on to the process. You start thinking about it, because if you think about it, maybe you talk about it with somebody else, um, then you've initiated the process for yourself and you'll master it over time. But it's true, it comes down to, do you care to learn and do you care to teach? And so many today they seemingly don't care, and everyone's got a right to make their own choice. But it just fascinates me how you I don't know, I feel crazy sometimes that uh, more people aren't interested, they don't have that care. um, so
Yeah.
So yeah, guys, we just got to start caring, and then everything will get a lot better. I think it's a good thing to note on.
Yeah.
yeah,
Literally.
that's the answer to life, is just start caring. But if you want to care, you got to put this image here, you got to put that into action. Got to have the grammar, then you got to think about it, use logic to form emotions, use those emotions to care to teach other people using rhetoric, and that rhetoric affects action in other people.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think that was, oh wait, there is one more. This is another way to look at it. This is interesting. This is that Trinity. I've seen that diagram used to the Father, the Son, the Holy Ghost. It's the same diagram. It's that all, for instance, mother, father, child, and I mean the nuclear family. And it's like, okay, if you have a male and a female, neither of them have any children. Well, then that female is not a mother. That male is not a father. But the second that male and that female create a child, well, then all three of them have defined their roles. Once that child, that third, exists, well, then the child is the child, the mother is the mother, and the father is the father, and they all are a package deal. So you have to define the whole thing. You can't just have a mother and no father. You have to have a father to make the baby with the mother. That's why it's the nuclear family, and that's why it's important. Same thing with the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, but that gets into theology, and there's a whole bit we could talk about with that. But again, the grammar, logic, rhetoric, that's the trivium.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Christian Trinity is so interesting. I have some thoughts on it, but I'm sure they'd be heretical to a majority of Christians.
Since we're at the end of the show, we'll save it for another time. Maybe we'll do an episode on the Trinity or something. I have done one podcast on it, and it'd be worth a revisit. Maybe put some graphics or something out. But
Yeah, and it would be cool if all of us, kind of from our own contexts and backgrounds, find some instances of the Trinity and some cool, interesting facts and context, and we'll lay them out and connect them together, see what comes of it
yeah,
sometime in the
and
future.
we got a lot of interesting ideas
Mm-hmm.
to do, and I know we've already said we're going to do future shows on everything that we hadn't had a chance to cover. So we've got quite a bit of guests that we want to get on. We've got quite a bit of topics that we want to talk about, and we're just going to have to offer them to you, as they come. So with that said, guys, I mean, that is the conclusion of the presentation. That is the show for today, and we really hope you guys study this a bit more, and use this as a starting point, if you will. But guys, do you have anything else to say before we close this out? Because we're at about an hour and 6 minutes.
No, I think we've covered some good ground today. I think we're good to go.
Yeah, me too.
All right, guys. Well, we appreciated you giving us a little bit of your time and taking a look at this information and hearing what we have to say. You're an integral part of this process. As you've just learned, you are the culmination of our rhetoric. We're presenting all these things to you, the listening audience, the people who are listening to this on any of the platforms. And I highly encourage you to follow us on every platform. All the links are going to be down in the description. And like and subscribe and do all that good stuff. We probably should start saying that more, because I think you're supposed to say that when you make videos. Like and subscribe. Smash that like button, guys. Maybe we'll get some sound effects up in here or something. Make
Yeah.
it interesting. We need a soundboard or something. Just hit
Yeah.
people's dopamine, because we know people are ADHD and can't pay attention now.
Just do a fucking comically generic YouTube intro. Hey, how's it going, guys? Welcome back to Parables and Pastiche. Don't forget to like and subscribe, ring that little bell button on the back, and share it with your friends.
No, we should just have Parables and Pastiche, and then have one of the Minecraft graphics where it's like the shitty old dubstep music playing in the background.
my
and
God.
it's like the pulsing Parables and Pastiche sign. That'd be great.
We might do something like that.
That'd be
I might get goofy with it just because.
Oh, we should have had that intro for the irony poisoning segments.
Oh, that would have been
That would have been great.
sick.
That would have been a great one. But the
Oh.
best laid plans of mice and men often go awry. You ever heard that quote?
Yeah.
It's a good quote. The best laid plans of mice and men often go awry.
Right, that's a funny word. I haven't heard that one in a while.
Yeah.
Just
Oh,
like Lenny getting shot in the head. It's truly
Yeah.
unlucky.
The original poem was by Robert Burns, who was a Scottish poet. Read the whole poem in the original Scottish dialect. Good luck. We had to do that in high school, and it was one of it.
In
Scottish?
Gaelic?
No,
Oh,
it,
no.
it was in English, but it's like they put the accent into the words.
That's
like-
interesting.
It's like, have you ever heard of Cockney?
No.
You have to look it up. Cockney is like, I don't know how to explain it. It's like they'll use words that sound alike to something
You sure it
else.
wasn't Gaelic?
No, it was not Gaelic.
Okay.
I don't think it was.
Because it sounds like, because that's kind of like what Gaelic is. Gaelic is like a fucked up version of English, basically.
1 second, let me see. Let me look that up real quick. To a Mouse is the name of the poem. A Scots language is what it is. Scots is the language.
Scots.
Yeah, trust me.
Very original, very original.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think we're gonna let's end it up though.
All right, guys. We're just rattling on. Have a good one,
Yeah.
guys. We appreciate it.
Have a good one, guys.
Take
Have a
care.
blessed day.
Bye bye.